Welcome to the Sustainable Clinical Medicine podcast. I am your host, Sarah Smith. I am a practicing rural family physician and the charting coach. This is the podcast for physicians and advanced practice providers who are ready to step back from the busyness of their clinical day to share ideas, question everything, and redesign their clinical day. We are redesigning clinical medicine to create sustainable clinical days and create time for our lives outside of medicine. Join us for discussions with world experts who are helping design sustainable models of clinical medicine and the physicians or clinicians who have discovered or designed sustainable models of clinical medicine for themselves. Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate having you here. I will be back in some future podcasts with some of the comments that you've been leaving about the podcast, but I am very thankful for those because it helps us keep this in the spirit that it was intended to help you in your clinical day. So today we have physician and author, Dr. Gail Gazelle, who wrote the book, Mindful MD, 6 Ways Mindfulness Restores Your Autonomy and Cures Healthcare Burnout. So welcome, Dr. Gazelle. I will let you introduce yourself.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Sarah. Really a pleasure. Okay, so I spent most of my clinical career as a hospice and palliative care doc. I did my training here in Boston in the Harvard Medical System. So I've been faculty at Harvard Medical School for at least 2 decades plus. And I went to medical school to work in end-of-life care. So I absolutely loved my career. I experienced burnout. I had a child on my own, so I was his sole parent. And when I was at work, I felt guilty that I wasn't home with my son. When I was home with my son, I felt like I should be doing more for my patients, and I felt very guilty. Right. And I had this constant gnawing sense within me that I was never good enough. Wasn't good enough at home, wasn't good enough as a clinician, wasn't good enough as an academician. And so I stumbled into coaching myself and found it life and career changing. I'd had a lot of therapy for complicated family issues, like many of us have, but coaching just allowed me to leapfrog forward. It really was a game changer, got me out of burnout, I think made me a much better parent, made me a much better doctor, and really helped me shed a lot of the stories that I had about never being good enough, kind of being an imposter here at Harvard Medical School in particular. So in 2011, I became a coach. So I was really one of the first physicians, to go ahead and do that. And I've really had the pleasure over the last 12 years of coaching more than 500 physicians and physician leaders about getting out of burnout, career transitions, promotions, leadership roles, mindfulness, et cetera. And we'll get to my book, Mindful MD, in just a minute, but I've always had an interest in mindfulness. And between 2017 and 2019, I took a deep dive. I did a 2-year mindfulness meditation teacher training, and I've since led 6 mindfulness retreats for physicians. So we're now in 2023. I have a team of coaches working with me. I have a very busy coaching practice. I have the Facebook group, the popular Facebook group, Mindful MD. And I wrote this book, which is actually my 3rd book. And individuals can download a free chapter at gailgazelle.com/mindfulmd. But I know we'll talk more about why I believe that mindfulness can restore our autonomy and cure healthcare burnout.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear how you were introduced to coaching. So where did that come in? So you've been doing some therapy, you said. So where did you come across or stumble across coaching? What happened there?
It is interesting because in 2011, coaching was not a part of the physician landscape the way it is now. And I heard about a coach. She was not a physician. She's a PhD. And I just thought, oh, okay, maybe this could help me. I wasn't really even sure what it was, to be quite honest. But it was really a profoundly transformative experience and helped me move beyond a lot of the roots of burnout. And I get into this in the Mindful MD book. The first part of the book, which is the short part of the book, is called The Roots of Burnout. And there's so much in our medical training that we learn that really sadly derails us as we move into our careers, either perfect or a failure, never show weakness, comparisons, ratings, and rankings, so that we never really feel like we are good enough. And then, of course, saying things to ourselves that we would never say to our worst enemy. And these are all things that we learn in our medical training. This is part of the secret handshake, in a way, of becoming a physician. And so my own experience was that all of those things really kept me in burnout. They kept me from focusing on the good that I was doing as a physician. They kept me from really focusing on being good enough as opposed to being perfect, that unattainable standard of perfection. They helped me step out of what we call in mindfulness comparing mind, that thing that plants the seed of the imposter syndrome. Oh, she's smarter than me. He's a better presenter than me. You know, that one is so much more articulate. All of those things in comparing mind that keep us trapped in not feeling good enough and adequate enough within ourselves. So I really tried in the book. The book is an easy read, lots of vignettes of dozens of physicians, really trying to convey some of this to help physicians see that they do not have to hand over their happiness to what can only be described as a broken healthcare system. Certainly in the United States, I coach a lot of Canadian docs. Things are not exactly great in Canada either.
So we don't have to hand over our happiness to the healthcare system. I like this, to the broken healthcare system. Tell me more about that. So handing over happiness, how do we give our happiness away? What are you noticing about the physicians you're looking after, or even in yourself?
I think this is a really important point because the healthcare system in many Western countries is broken at best. And if we didn't know that before the pandemic, we understand it now, right? I think it's abundantly clear. And sadly, there's so much under-resourcing, understaffing, so much that is dysfunctional, so many inequities. So I think that's abundantly clear. And many people are comfortable saying, yes, it is broken. But the question is, what do we do? How do we navigate that? How do we still thrive in these careers that we have worked so incredibly hard to achieve, that we've sacrificed so much to be successful in? And sadly, what I see in so many of the physicians that I coach is kind of a downtrodden state. I can't be happy given the mess that healthcare is in. They need to fix the system for me to be happy. And it's really interesting if you think about those two statements, which I think a lot of physicians are kind of stuck in. It's really saying, I can't be happy, satisfied, and fulfilled right here, right now. My happiness is contingent on something exterior to me, external to me being done. And that's a very disempowered place. Right? That's a disempowered place saying, I can't get what I need unless something out there that I have zero control over changes. And what I want for all physicians, all of my colleagues, you know, internationally, is to be able to control what they can control and stop dissipating their precious energy on things that they will never have any hope of controlling. So obviously, for any physician working on systems improvement, all of us are delighted working on better EMRs, right? Scribes, you know, using AI appropriately so that we don't have to be doing all of these below grade tasks that we're stuck doing. There's no question that the need is great. At the same time, what are you going to do? What are you going to do on a day-to-day basis so that you can be fulfilled, so that you don't find yourself going home and being so negative that when your spouse asks, so honey, how was your day? You just unload every misery and don't tell them anything that went well. And then you're sitting at the dinner table with your kids and you can't even really be present with them because you're so distracted by everything that's going wrong. So that's really what I'm all about. I'm a pragmatist as a coach, as an author, as a human being. And there are a lot of mental stories that we have that we tell ourselves that I think keep us trapped in handing over that happiness that really leaves us just with no choice but to think to ourselves, I have to get out of this.
Mm. Certainly the escape quest. I'm seeing a lot. The dreading work, like you say, coming home and just having that negativity of the day, the dumping it out, that, is the only way to stop this to leave, right? Because the system isn't changing anytime soon. We have this, when we're in that loop, it's really hard to hear that happiness is available to us.
It's very hard to hear it. And what is really important is realizing that we have a choice about where we let our minds go. So again, in my book, Mindful MD, the 6 ways that mindfulness can restore your autonomy and cure healthcare burnout, one of the ways is step out of stories. So what do I mean by that? Well, we all have stories, narratives, things that we tell ourselves in a repetitive fashion that may be true, or they may be completely false. And so what I see in physician after physician is a storyline, again, about happiness, but a storyline about how things are going. I mean, honestly, in our training, we learn that we are the ones in control. We're the ones in control of the human body, right? We're not just the fix-it people. Oh, excuse me. We're not just the fix-it people, but we can control. We can control what happens in the liver. We can control what happens in an ICU, right? And then we face a healthcare system where there is so much that we cannot control. And so we have these internal stories. Well, it's not right. Nobody sees how hard I'm working.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just a widget. I'm just a cog in a wheel. Nobody sees how much I do for each and every one of my vulnerable patients. And that's a storyline. That's a storyline that kind of takes us down a deep downward spiral of disempowerment. And it keeps us trapped in a lens that says nothing is going well here. But really, the beauty of applied mindfulness, not just sitting and meditating, is getting to know what is going on in the mind, getting to know the mental stories. Why? Not just so you can be aware, but so you can realize that you have choice over which mental stories you give attention to and which ones you do not. So kind of a simple way to think about it is the challenge that I would offer to your listeners to pay attention and notice which of your thoughts and stories are helpful to you and which ones are not. Let's spend a day kind of keeping track which of them are helpful and which of them are not. And it's really amazing how many of our thoughts and stories are playing out unhelpful to us. And I'll just give an example from the book. There's a thoracic surgeon who I call Brian, who was sent for coaching because of disruptive behaviors. He was thought to be condescending to the nurses, rude, curt. When people would call him for a consult, he was also condescending to the ED doc, for example. And this was brought to his attention. And initially, when this information was given to him, he just thought to himself, oh, what a bunch of wusses. They just don't see how much good I do for my hospital. Okay, so kind of typical surgical mentality, my way or the highway. I'm the boss here. That's what he had learned in his training. And as I got to know him, I realized just how many stories he had about who he was and about who the nurses were and whether he should even listen to them, whether they were important, whether that ED doc knew what he or she was doing. A lot of preconceived notions. And I tasked Brian with spending 2 weeks of paying attention to his own thoughts and seeing which ones were helpful to him and which were not. But you know what? It didn't take him 2 weeks. After 3 days, Brian called me and he said to me, Gail, it's like a crazy town up there. I had no idea what was going on in my own mind. I didn't realize how many of my thoughts were just really derailing me. And all of a sudden, the feedback that Brian had gotten made sense to him. And that's what was so important, because Brian had to buy in to the need for change. It was one thing to get this feedback, but if it was completely dissonant with what Brian understood about himself, obviously he wouldn't incorporate it. But once he could really see what his mind was up to, he was such an avid learner. We physicians love to learn. And all of a sudden, Brian could turn that lens of learning on himself. And in very short order, his behavior changed. He realized these were just human beings, nurses, ED docs, whoever they were, coming to him in their need to take good care of their patient population. And he could feel a lot better about himself if he actually was constructive there, rather than, just kind of like, get out of my way and don't, and you just need to listen to me. I'm the boss. So what I hope you can take from that as you listen to this podcast is the control you can have, the true autonomy that you can have over yourself, even when the external autonomy has clearly been eroded.
Got it. If we were to go back to when you were experiencing burnout, I know this is that pre-2011. So you were working as a palliative care physician at the time. Is that when you were having with your small baby?
Yes. He is now 26. So yes, he was maybe a teenager and a young teenager then. Yes.
Yeah. What did burnout look like for you? So what was the experience of the burnout that you were experiencing then?
It was profound. I mean, I'd wake up in the morning already kind of downcast, dreading the day, what was before me, how overbooked my schedule would be, which patients I had to see. There was some overlap. I was doing outpatient internal medicine and I was a hospice physician at that time. So there was this tremendous dread. There was a kind of blinders where I really couldn't see the good in my day. It all looked negative. And that felt horrible. I'd go visit home visits for, terminally ill patients. It felt terrible to leave their house realizing that I hadn't been fully present because my mind was off in all of this kind of mishigas about, that nothing was going well. So there was kind of the guilt on top of the dread, right? And guilt is a very, very oppressive emotion, to say the least. I didn't have any spark. I didn't have energy. Even when I was with my son and he wanted to, go to a baseball game or whatever we were doing together, I was a little bit irritable. My mind, I felt like my son was almost distracting me from where my mind was stuck in all the perceived miseries. So I felt like crap about myself as a mother. On top of that, and then here I am at Harvard Medical School. I'm trying to publish papers. My first paper was published around that time in the New England Journal of Medicine. And I felt like, well, I should be doing more. Why can't I get another paper out? It wasn't enough that I published in, the New England Journal of Medicine was pretty darn good. But it was this constant kind of never good enough that played over and over and over in my mind. And then something that I see in so many of the physicians that I've coached, this sense that I had to always prove myself. My notes were not just my notes. My notes were proof of worth. Well, when the cardiologist reads it, am I going to sound smart enough? Am I going to be caring enough? Is my grammar going to be good enough? Talk about perfectionism. It really had a hold on me. So that's kind of the before picture, Sarah.
What did your evenings and weekends look like? So you were doing some work, like you were interacting with your kid. You were presumably cooking supper because you were the single mom.
Yes.
Yes. What else? So anything about the day? So when did you do those notes?
Right. So like many of my colleagues, I was doing the pajama time drill. So in the evenings when I should have been just enjoying my son and helping him see that he was the number one, I think he probably felt like he was competing for the number one slot because mom was on the computer. Mom was kind of rushing to get through the evening, whatever it was, homework, getting him to bed, etc. But mom wasn't really making him the priority. So again, didn't feel good to me. Whatever my son's memories of it are a different story, but every child deserves to feel like their parents are fully there for them. And children know it when we're distracted, either physically on the computer, catching up with things, or worse, mentally, we're not really there with them. So similarly on the weekends, again, as an academician, I kind of always felt like I should be producing. I should be, doing something, creating something good for the world. But that was a big distraction. And it kept me not just from being present and not just feeling guilty, but not enjoying life in the fullness, not kind of having that downtime to recover from a busy week.
Yeah. What did downtime look like as a academic, working hard, single mom? What did downtime look like for you?
Oh, downtime was not feeling like there was something I needed to do, right? That ever present to-do list, whether it's charts, whether it's callbacks, whether it's, writing a case report. Sure, there are the domestic to-dos, do the laundry, sweep the floor. But I think it's a lot of those work productivity to-dos that for us as physicians really weigh us down because we carry this motif that other physicians can get it done. This is so many of my clients say to me, I'm not like those other doctors that get up at 5 a.m., get their charts done, go to the gym, take a shower, and are on time for their first patient. This fantasy of, again, that comparing mind that leaves us feeling like we're coming up short.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, downtime was the ability to put all of that aside and actually be present and be joyful with this beautiful human being who happens to be my son.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe to have some time with friends, as well, or do fun things, get out in nature.
Was a lot of that happening at the time when you were feeling burnt out? The fun, the catching up with people, there was interaction with your kid because he was in your house, but do you think you were allowing yourself that much off time from the
I love the way you put that, Sarah. Were you allowing yourself? Because no, I was so stuck in the gotta do, gotta get done, that I didn't allow myself. You're exactly right. Even in time that I might have done some of those enjoyable things, there was always that putting it off. And I think we learned that in our training too. It's all about delayed and deferred gratification.
Yeah.
You
You
know?
mentioned irritable. I'm wondering if how does irritable show up in your relationship in the house?
Hmm. Sure, you're asking me to take a deep dive into my worst moments, aren't you?
I am, because I guess, and the reason I tend to take you here is just simply the people listening to the podcast are often still there.
Of course, yes.
They're still having the irritable, the
Yes.
dread, the
Yeah.
tired, the not allowing the weekend or any kind of downtime. So I'm like, it's nice to hear that you're human, that you had these experiences.
My name is Gail.
There's an after.
Happy to own my humanness. Sure. So my son might say, Mom, let's go do this together. I mean, he was still young enough to want to do things with his mother, but I'd be like, oh, no, I can't, or not now, or the irritability probably crept into my voice tone, like almost inside of myself, a kind of a leave me alone that I'm sure came out in how I answered his simple little boy questions, right? Because mom was busy. Mom had these other things to do. And again, it just leaves us feeling so crappy about ourselves. That I remember very clearly. I just felt so guilty and felt like, well, what kind of mother am I? And again, my comparing mind, other mothers know how to do this better than I do. Other mothers can make their child a priority. This whole story, even though so many physician moms are caught in this very same trap.
What does your interaction at work look like? Is there irritability coming into those relationships as well, do you think?
Looking back, when I was working as a hospice doc and as an internist, oh, very definitely, because I turned that same critical nature of myself into being hypercritical of those that I worked with. So if there was an MA who wasn't rooming patients in the pace that I thought they should be, or despite being instructed 4 times how to take vitals, still wasn't doing it properly, I was not as kind as I could have been, really looking back on it, because again, I think I was so used to criticizing myself and, seeing everything as a problem, really, which again is part of the roots of burnout that we learn in our training, that I was looking around and seeing the people around me as a problem.
That's
And
so
I,
interesting.
and we can think to ourselves, well, that MA needs to learn. But the question is, how does the MA need to learn? Is the MA really going to learn by us being irritable with them? Or is the MA going to learn just the way a child needs to learn, which is by being reinforced and being told, you're doing this well. I think it would be great if you did a little more of that just as well, because I know you have it in you. That's the way to get people to grow and change. But we certainly don't learn that in our medical training.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Yes. Okay. So I guess we've seen that irritability, it's coming in and out of the different relationships that you're having. Was anyone noticing you had potentially changed? I don't know. What would you say? Would you say that you looked different in burnout than you had maybe years before?
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I think I include this in the book. People say to me now, not only do you look happier, but you look younger.
Right.
Like I aged a lot. I was scowling. My
Mhm.
forehead was furrowed. My shoulders were up. I wasn't sleeping well. So, of course, that contributed to how I presented to the world.
Mm. Who noticed? Do you have anyone that was in your circle that was kind of pointing that out to you, or kind of what was the discovery process like for you for burnout?
Well, sure, friends noticed. The coach that I was starting to work with certainly noticed and could help me build my own self awareness. But I think most importantly, I knew. I knew I was not showing up at my best. And that really eroded my sense of confidence. It contributed to a lot of self questioning and self doubting. And it contributed to a lot of mental stories that just served to, I would say, make things worse.
Hmm. Did you need any time off or time out around that time?
Well, need is an interesting question. I think what you're asking is, did I take any of that?
Did
And
you
the,
take
the
any?
answer, because of everything we've just walked through, would be a big no.
Mm, okay. So you're in this place of dreading work, getting up early, working all the time, not letting yourself have joy, not letting yourself have time off, always in that place of there's more things to do, leave me alone, which is coming out as irritability. And you've got some people noticing, you've got some tools in your toolbox like your therapy, and then you went looking for a coach, but you wouldn't let yourself have time off. Okay. But you went looking for a coach. I'm curious. So you noticed something was going wrong. Is that why you pursued this new person to help? Is that just
Sure. I knew I needed some help to do things
Mhm.
differently, because all human beings want to grow toward the light.
Mhm.
It's part of our DNA that we want to improve, but sometimes we don't know how. And
Yeah.
again, in our training, I think we learn many things that take us in exactly the wrong direction. So we have to unlearn a lot of what we learn in our training to really thrive in our careers. So, yes, I realized that I was having trouble figuring this out on my own. I didn't see the path forward. And sure, I had a stack of self help books and I listened to podcasts and books on tape. And but that's not the same as actually getting in the trenches and really having an accountability partner, all the things that we provide as coaches to our physician clients. We all need that companionship. We need somebody to guide us on that journey. So that's what coaching afforded me.
Yeah. Yeah. So that coach is almost part of your community, that noticer, somebody helping you navigate it. Love it.
Navigate the external and navigate the internal.
Mhm.
Really, that's certainly what I've done in the over 500 physicians and physician leaders that I've coached. It's about figuring out your own patterns, figuring out the part that you play in the difficulties that you're having, and what part can you play in living a better life.
Mhm.
That's the beauty of what we bring as physician coaches. And we help our clients not by teaching or telling them, but by helping them have aha moments about their own lives and their own journey and the ways their own training has impacted them. Because I think a lot of it is nuanced and unconscious.
Yeah.
And yet, when, I coach a lot of surgeons, and surgeons have brutal training, even modern day surgeons. I was
Mm.
coaching a vascular surgeon, a young woman, she's not that many years in her career, and just hearing about her training, it's still very, very challenging, particularly for women, in male dominated fields like many of the surgical specialties. And we have to really understand what got us here, how it's showing up today. We have to almost diagnose our own patterns before we can intervene with them.
Mm. If you thought that some time off would have been helpful, what do you think the obstacles were to having that afforded to you?
I think I've painted a pretty good picture of what life was like then. It's interesting to me that you want to keep me stuck there.
Just a moment longer, because I think that the obstacles before 2011 and the obstacles now might be similar to people taking that time to let some of that stress settle. So when I'm seeing physicians who are in that, it's really at that point of desperation, physically or mentally, that they will eventually allow themselves the time off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it's just interesting that you said it's a big NO. I had the time off.
Right.
I'm like, but you wanted it. I'm wondering why you didn't. Like, what was it about the system then that might still exist now, that prevents us taking that step away, the step
let's
back?
face it, so many of us women physicians were trained to be caregivers from a young age. We were trained to be there for others, and the relational style that we learn as women is really about taking care of, making sure that the other person's needs are met. So that makes it very difficult for us to have a sense that we deserve time away, that we deserve to have our needs met. And in the Mindful MD book, I share something that I go over with all of my clients, which is what I call the daily dose of goodness. So, however busy you are, whatever demands you have in the child rearing, in the patient, population, your leadership role, your academic role, taking care of aging parents, you still need to give yourself a daily dose of goodness. Now, that can be a cup of tea, could be a hot bath. It could be reading one page in a book that is of interest to you and is not about human physiology. That could be a meditating. It could be talking to an old friend. It could be petting the dog. It could be sitting with your beautiful 10-year-old and actually listening to them. But a daily dose of goodness is key. So many wellness activities now, and I give a lot of keynotes about burnout and wellness, and people just think, oh, it's going to be just another one where they tell you to go meditate, keep a gratitude journal, do a little yoga, and use your vacation time, and you will be fine. I do not subscribe to that particular plan. We need to build in nourishment each and every day, or at least each and every week, because otherwise the physician's career is like crossing the desert without a drop of water. That's really what it is for so many of the physicians that I coach. And that is not sustainable. So we have to nourish ourselves, even closing the door in your office, standing up from your chair and stretching for 2 minutes. That's a daily dose of goodness. That's something that you're doing that is just for you. And I can't recommend that strongly enough.
Mm-hmm. See, there's a little diamond. I love that, because it's saying that even if you have the time off, like you get time off because you're burnt out, it doesn't mean you're coming back better.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you just take the time off and
Mm.
suddenly you're thrown back into where you were before, that's not necessarily a healthy or healed physician coming back, right?
Very definitely. And so many times, our minds are just running, running, running. We go on that vacation for 7 days and we spend 6 days still thinking about everything we have to get done. So we're
Yes.
not even refreshed. I think all of us know that pattern very well. So we have to build in sustenance.
Yeah.
And I wish we learned that in our training. I wish we
Agree.
learned to prioritize self-care, because then we'd get good at it. We'd get used to that daily dose of goodness.
That's right. And you're so right that we carers of others. I mean, that is what we have been trained to do, is to look after the needs of others and often suppress our human physiology in the process, and our needs and our, desires, like you're looking after yourself things. So the self-care part being brought in each day, I think, is just a really nice reminder.
It's
You're
absolutely
important
wonderful.
too. We look
Well,
after you, you can keep looking after others.
the oxygen mask metaphor, or the car. You can't run that car forever without, changing the
Without
oil here and
fueling
there.
up. Yeah.
Yeah. So a message to all of your listeners is that you deserve to take care of yourself. You deserve to do what I talk about in Mindful MD. Put your most important patient first. And that is the one that you see in the mirror every single day. You have to get better at putting your most important patient first.
Hey, very good. So you had brought some take-home tips for people. So just some ideas. So your like top 3 tips if people are back in that place of burnout and having that experience of medicine that is not enjoyable, they're irritable, they're miserable, they're they're frustrated with their MA. What would you suggest? What are some of the things that are your pearls for them?
There are quite a few. The
Yes.
first pearl is download a free chapter of my book, gailgazelle.com/mindfulmd, because you will find a lot of pearls, not being told that you need to meditate and life and your practice will be wonderful. But a couple of gems. One is to take some pauses in your day. Our lives, are like a sprint. We get up, we get the kids off, we barely get out of the house, and then we face an overbooked schedule, a crazy inbox, unbelievable demands. And you have to be able to pause. That is a simple thing. I call it the purposeful pause, just pausing and taking 3 slow, deep breaths, just doing that in between patients or in between, telehealth visits, whatever it is. It sounds so crazy simple. And yet it can really make the difference between kind of a sprint and running the marathon of a medical career. So that's one thing. The second, we've already covered, a daily dose of goodness. No matter how busy your day is, no matter what the to-dos are, no matter how many patient crises you have to deal with, give yourself a daily dose of goodness because it will really help you manage all of the difficulties that you face. And then the third is remind yourself that you do not have to hand over your happiness to a broken system. Bottom line, too many physicians are doing that. Too many physicians are walking around saying, I can't be happy because of the mess of healthcare. And I am here to say that you deserve to be happy, you deserve to be satisfied, fulfilled, and you deserve to thrive personally and professionally, no matter what the blank is going on in the mess of healthcare.
Yeah, so important. So those things that help us get to that point of saying that seeing a different perspective, like we covered earlier, is that look inside, seeing what we're saying to ourselves on repeat, noticing what we're saying to ourselves about the day, the patients, the booking, the MA, just that noticing first, and then the curiosity of what else about this is true. Where am I able to make choices that could make me feel different even when nothing else around me changes? And I think that's that coaching piece that says that what we're saying on default isn't necessarily what has to keep being said on default.
Definitely. That's the first way in my book. Recognize that you are not your thoughts. Plain and simple. You are not your thoughts. I wish we had learned that in our training.
Right? So helpful to eventually it kind of makes sense and you're like, oh.
Yes.
Dale, thank you so much for being here with us today. Do you want to remind people where they can catch up with you? And we will obviously put links in below the podcast as well.
Yes, we offer a free coaching consultation. You can reach that at gailgazelle.com/consultation. And you can also download a copy of the book, Mindful MD, and you can do that at gailgazelle.com/mindfulmd.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. Is there anything we didn't cover that you wanted to say before we end?
Oh boy, we covered a lot, Sarah. This was really a pleasure, but I guess I just want to end on a hopeful note that you can get out of burnout. You can thrive in your career. You can be fulfilled and you can work with, the guilt and all of the emotions. And you really can be at your best no matter what is going on around you.
Lovely. Perfect. Thank you. Have a great rest of the day, everybody. Thank you for being part of the Sustainable Clinical Medicine podcast. If you'd like to learn more or join us to help you get home with today's work done, go to chartingcoach.ca. There you'll find all the information on the premier Lifetime Access Charting Champions program that is helping physicians get home with today's work done, with all the proven tools, support, and community you need to create time for your life outside of medicine. We would love to see you there. Until next time, thanks for listening.